Hey everybody, welcome to another playlist. This time Bill Sky, the GUI guy. GUI, ew, what's he talking about GUI? GUI, Graphical User Interface. And what we're going to do in this series is I'm going to show you how to actually write graphical user interface programs in C++ and then possibly Python, possibly Java. Pretty cool. Now these are not web applications, but these are like desktop applications, and also this type of technology transfers itself over to devices like the iPhone, Android, things like that. So one of my dissertations and one of my graduate degrees was on usability, graphical user interface design. I was a big fan of Steve Jobs and his ability to take something very, very complicated and make it into something very easy to understand. I found that the majority of graphical user interface programs were getting more difficult as time moved forward. So we're losing this skill of how to create easy to use software. Command line, great for administrators, great for developers, but for the end user, like Joe Blow down the street, they don't like command line. So we're going to do GUI in this series. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mess around with C++ and QT. And QT, I'm going to introduce, is a graphical user interface canvas and designer. It allows you to, it's free as long as you use it as a hobbyist, but it allows you to create really easy graphical user interfaces. And then after we mess around with QT and maybe even touch on a little bit of database work and how you can create a graphical user interface program using QT in a database to display data, we might actually get into the weeds, which is the Windows Application Programmers Interface native API for graphical user interface applications, possibly even Mac, possibly even Linux. So with all that said, should be an awful lot of fun doing all this. I'm hoping you're going to learn a lot. Let's get started with QT setup. Let's go ahead and get QT all set up on our Windows operating system here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to download.qt.io official releases online installers. Now you'll probably also be able to find this if you just do a Google search on QT download installer, and you'll be able to find it. As you can see right here, I'm recording this in early September 2023. The most recent version is out here on the QT download, last modified on this date and time. So I'm going to go ahead and download the Windows version. Now there is something about QT that you need to know. It is a pay-for application development studio, but it's free as long as you're a hobbyist and as long as you get a QT ID. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to type qt.io. While that's downloading, I'm going to do this. Now this is good for Windows, Mac, Linux. And from here, I'm going to click on this little person face right here if my mouse is right. And I don't have an account. Actually, I do, but if you don't have an account, go ahead and click on Create QT Account. Give it your email, your password, verify your password. It's got some protection for bots and things like that. And what that will do is that will create an ID that you need when you do the install. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, can I download the installer offline, download the whole thing offline, then I don't have to be on the internet and I don't need to log in. You can't do that unless you pay them the $365 a month, your commercial product. You definitely don't want to do that. Whoa, $365 a month, what are you talking about? If you're going to write a program that you're going to sell to anybody, you've got to pay for QT. If you're just going to be doing it for learning how to do graphic user interfaces and maybe develop your application and then move it over into a production environment where you're then going to make money on it, you don't have to pay any money to the QT company until you actually start making money on it. So I think that's actually kind of a neat little thing. And if you're making enough money on your product, it's going to be easy to pay them that amount of money. Now, I don't know how long you have to pay them. I haven't looked into the license agreement. But while you're developing the application, if you're modifying it and if you're using QT to do that, I think you need to pay them for that. But if you're making, $50,000 a month on your application, that money's not too bad. So go ahead and create that. Once the download is finished, I'm going to go to my downloads folder. And we're doing this on Windows first. And I'm just going to click on the QT Unified Windows x64 online installer. Now, I haven't seen any requirements for this. I haven't seen that you absolutely have to have any special user interface installed in here. However, what I would recommend that you do is also install Visual Studio 2022. I will put a link to that in the description of this video, and or Sys2. I think it's MSys2, yes. MSys2 is the C and C++ development tools. It also has Fortran, all kinds of stuff. And that is the non-Microsoft compiler linker suite. So I will put a link to that also in this video description so you can see how to install both of those on Windows. It's pretty easy, but those are the compilers that you need. And now what it's doing is it's asking me for my QT user ID and password, and I'm going to go ahead and get that. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of hide that from you guys because I don't want you guys, stealing my identity. So let me go ahead and hide that. And I'm going to go ahead and put my email in there, and I'm going to put my password. Click next. It's logging me into their server, making sure I've got an account. The next thing it does is it says, do you agree? Yes, that's fine. And I'm an individual. And I'm not going to use it for any kind of a company. Next. Next. It's going to download some what it needs. It's going to kind of like download a catalog of all of its components. All right. I like to disable sending pseudo-anonymous user statistics. It's up to you what you want to do. I don't like people collecting my information. I haven't heard anything bad about it. So then I went ahead and click next. And notice that the install is C:\QT. Perfectly fine. And I'm going to leave custom installation turned on. I'm going to click next. And I'm going to expand QT Design Studio. And if you notice right here, it's the most recent version. This snapshot version, I kind of think those are betas. Nobody's ever told me that those are betas, but yeah, I think it's a beta. And then I'm going to expand QT. I don't like beta software, so I'm going to click on QT 652. And that's the most recent non-beta software. I'm going to click next. I agree. Go ahead and make it the QT application folder, and I'm going to click install. Now, during this, I've noticed this has happened before, and it mainly happens on Wi-Fi. This computer right here is connected to the internet via an internet cable, Ethernet cable. You might get a thing that says that it couldn't download something, retry. Go ahead and hit that retry button. But then I've seen it come up and say it didn't have the correct SHA, S-H-A validation file. It couldn't download that. So this could take a good hour. In fact, if you look at it right now, it says this is going to take 3 hours and 53 minutes. However, that does speed up as the files get bigger. Now it's up to 4 hours, but it will speed up. I'm going to click on Show Details, and it shows me what's downloading. So go ahead and let this download complete. Once the download is complete, then we'll go ahead and finish up the setup, and then we'll move on to Linux and then Mac as well. Okay, looks like install was completed, so I'm going to go ahead and click Next. It asks me if I want to launch them. I'm going to turn those off. And now you can delete that installer. I'm going to come down here to my search, and I'm going to type QT. And here's my QT design. Now you don't want to put that on your desktop. You want to put the QT Creator Community. So I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to say Open File Location. And I'm just going to hold down my right mouse button, drag this to my desktop, say copy. And now when I double click on this, it should bring up the QT Creator. Now, what you might want to do is, if you're not interested in Linux or Mac, you might want to go to the chapter links at the bottom of this video underneath the description and jump to the demonstration project. And I'm going to actually demonstrate creating your first graphical user interface. And we're going to do it with QT Creator. Pretty cool. And hope to see you at the demo. Hey there, so what we're going to do here is we're going to show you how to install the basic Qt development environment in Linux. Now I have Mint Linux 21.2 installed here. This works fine on Ubuntu, it works fine on Fedora. But one thing I do want to make sure that you understand you must have is that you must have a compiler installed. Now the way that you can tell whether or not you have a compiler installed is you just go ahead and load up a terminal and just type G++. If you get this fatal error, no input files, that means that G++ is there. You just don't, you didn't give it the information it needed to actually do a compile. So if that's the case, that's great. You might also want to check for Python to see if you have Python 3 in this case, and it looks like I do. So also Java, you might want to say Java version, and that'll tell you whether or not Java is installed. Because in this series, we're going to actually be doing all these different languages. So it's really easy. Now, if you don't have G++ or C++ installed, just say sudo apd update, type in your administrative password. Now, the reason I'm doing this on Linux is because Linux really is the developer's environment of choice. And I mean, people could argue with me about that. That's fine. But it's easy to get all this set up, and if you don't believe me, watch the Windows and then watch the Linux version of these videos, and you're going to see just how much easier it is on Linux. So you want to make sure you say sudo apt install dev essential, or build essential. Sorry about that. And now I already have it installed, but if you don't have it installed, it'll say, do you want to install it? Say yes, and install it, and then G++, GCC. Now Python, I believe Python will also be installed, but Java won't. You might have to install Java. And when we get to that, I'll show you how to do that on Linux. Okay, so what do we do next? So we have to download Qt. So I'm going to bring up my browser, and I'm going to go to download.qt.io, official releases, online installers. And I'm going to download the .run. Now this is a run script, so you have to execute it from the command line. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that and download it. It's going to download it to my downloads folder. It's going to go pretty quick. Okay, so I'm going to close my browser. I'm now going to go to my home folder, documents. There it is right there. I'm going to right click, open in terminal. LSAL tells me whether or not it's executable. Most of the time when you download files from the internet, even though they are programs, they're not executable on Linux, and that's one of the protections of Linux. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the whole thing just with my mouse, right click, say copy, and then I'm going to say sudo / right click paste and press enter. Oh, but you'll see it says command not found because I didn't actually make it runnable. So before we do that, I have to say change mod +X and then paste it, and then I can start it up. And then once I start it up, it asks me for my user ID and password for Qt. Now, if you didn't watch the Windows version of this, it's the same on Linux. It's exactly the same. You need a user ID and password. Go ahead, get one on QT.io. It's very, very simple. Let me show you really quickly how to do that, just in case you didn't watch the Windows version. Just QT.io. Go up here, this little person icon you're going to see in just a moment. Click on create a Qt account, and they don't spam you, they don't do anything. They just want to keep track of who's using your products. It's not a problem. I've never had an issue with it, so don't be afraid of it. Okay, so I'm going to put in my, now I'm going to, you're not going to be able to see this because I don't want you doing my user ID and password. So I'm going to blur it, and then let me put that in there. Okay, then go ahead and press next. It's going to log in. It's going to check your licenses, fetching the installation. I've read it. I'm not going to use it as a company. I'm going to use it as a hobbyist individual. Next, next. It's then going to download catalog information about all the different components on QT. If you watch the Windows version, this one's literally no different. The installation is exactly the same. I like to disable the sending of anonymous data. Next. It says pseudo-anonymous, so that's kind of iffy. I'm going to leave custom installation. I'm going to leave all of this alone. That's the location of where it's going to be installed. I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to drop down Design Studio. I'm going to make sure I'm using the most recent that is not a snapshot. A snapshot is kind of like a beta. Not quite, but I don't like using things that haven't actually gone into general release yet. So I'm going to leave it at 4.2. And then I'm going to expand QT, and I'm going to click on QT 652. Okay, I want that as well. That is the most recent, which is not a beta. And I'm going to click next. I've read and agreed to it, and click install. Now, as I said in the Windows version of this video, this is going to take a few minutes. It's just, well, a few minutes. On Linux, it seems to be going much, much faster than on Windows. Windows was telling me 4 hours. On Linux, it's much faster. I'm not sure why. I'm going to click on Show Details, and it really is coming down a lot faster. It might also not be the operating system. It might have been that this installation simply went to a different mirror. I don't know. Actually, it looks like it's smaller, too. The Windows version, I believe, was like 6 gigabytes, and this one's only 3.5. Pretty cool. That's one of the reasons why people love Linux. So, when this gets done installing, again, I don't want to sit here on this video for 22 minutes, but we'll come back. I'll show you how to finish up the installation and see you in a little while. Okay, looks like the installation is done on Linux. So let's go ahead and click next and then finish. All right, so kind of not a big deal here. So you can go ahead and delete your run file. I'm going to go down here to the start menu, and I'm going to type QT. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see it. All right, so let's go here. Where did it put it? So let's go to programming. Interesting, I don't see it here. Let's go to all. Now it could be that it takes a little bit of time for the Linux to actually get that out there, but I don't see. I see QT settings. I'm going to click on that and see what we get. Okay, that looks okay. So I'm going to reboot this to see if we can see it after we reboot, because I've seen that happen before on Mint Linux. Okay, so I just rebooted my Linux. Let's go ahead and start, and let's type QT. Ah, there it is, QT Creator. So yeah, I had to reboot it. Not sure why, but I had to reboot it. Now, I'm on Mint Linux, so I can easily do this. I'm going to right-click on QT Creator and say Add to Desktop, and there's my QT Creator. So that's it. That's the setup for Linux. Now, if you want to jump to the example program at the end of this video, go ahead and take a look at the chapter links down below below the description, and click on the demo of creating your first project with a close button. You can see how cool it is. Go ahead and jump to that. But what's going to come up next is the Mac procedure, which is almost identical to the Linux, and you're going to love this when we do the demo. So, see you later. Okay, here we are on my Mac machine. Now, the thing that you have to do before you install QT on the Mac is that you have to install Xcode. Now, let's go ahead and make sure we've got Xcode installed. And I'm going to go over here to Applications, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and nope, there's my Xcode. You also want to make sure you update your operating system to all the most recent fixes. So go up to, and this is the most recent, this is version 13 of Mac OS. So I'm going to go up to there. I'm going to go to System Settings, and you want to make absolutely sure you have everything updated. Go to General, and then click on Software Update, and make sure you don't have any updates to be installed. I don't believe there are any needed here. And you also want to go to the App Store and make sure you do any kind of updates there. So you want to make absolutely sure you have all your updates. So I'm going to assume my updates are current, and I actually believe they are. And once I get Xcode installed, I want to start it at least one time. It'll install some additional components, and that should be it. All of your development tools should be installed. However, Qt still needs to be installed. So if you didn't watch the Windows or the Linux version of this, let's take a look at how to do that on Mac. It's exactly the same on a Mac as it is on those operating systems. So I'm going to go to download.qt.io official releases online installers. Press enter. Oops, I must have typed something in wrong. Let's take a look at what I did wrong here. Download.qt.official. Oh, forgot an underscore. And there it is. And you want to download the DMG one. So go ahead and start that download. It's not that big. It's the smallest of all of them. And when that download is completed, okay, I'm going to go to my Finder window. I'm going to double click. I'm going to go to Downloads. Oops, sorry. Too much alcohol for lunch. No, I'm just kidding. Just double click on the installer. That was the folder. Double click on the installer. What that's going to do is that's going to load a folder here. It's going to open a folder, and if I double click on that, I can then just double click on the Qt Unified Mac OS. Now, one thing to remember though, while you're doing the install, I'm going to click on open because it doesn't recognize the software provider. When you do this, you must have a Qt user ID and password. Now, it's very simple to do this. Just go to qt.io, and it's the same way for Windows or Mac or for Linux. It doesn't matter. Click on this little human icon here, and then come down to the bottom and click on Create Qt Account. Now, they don't ask you for any kind of special information. They just ask you for your email, your password. You type your password in again. Then you type in the characters that you see there, or in this, yeah, there's a character and a few numbers. They don't spam you. They don't sell your information. It's not a problem. I've never had an issue with it. So, I mean, don't hold me liable for it, but I've never had an issue with it. Go ahead and create that. Some of you may ask, well, why are they doing that? It's because they want to keep track of who's using their products. So once you go ahead and get that ID, right at the beginning of the install, you want to put your information in there. Now, I'm going to cover this up so you can't see it, but you would just put in your email address and your password. And then click Next. Again, this process is identical to Windows and Linux. I've read the agreement. I'm an individual. I'm not a company. Click Next. Click Next. Now it's going to download a bunch of catalog information about all the parts necessary to install Qt. Let that finish up. All right, I like to disable It's kind of weird, pseudo anonymous. I'm not sure what pseudo means, but I like to disable that. Click next. Now I'm going to select custom installation. It's also going to say where is it actually going to be stored. It's going to be installed in my home folder. So that's okay. That's all you need. And I'm going to click next on the custom installation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand QT, and I'm going to pick the most recent QT that is not a beta. So I don't like beta code. That's what I'm going to do. I look at the QT Design Studio. It's not the LTS. It's the most recent one that's been tested. LTS stands for long-term support. So that's okay. We're going to learn. This is a learning tool right now. I'm going to click next. Yes, I've read it. I agree. You can have my firstborn. Next, and install. And the installation is going to begin. Now, depending upon your connection to the internet, depending upon the mirror server that they've picked for you, it may take 50 minutes. It may take 4 hours. All right. So don't freak out. It's not that I've never had it. I've had it fail a few times, but that's because I wasn't paying attention to it. If you get a little message that says we're not able to download the file, retry or abort, just go ahead and click retry. There's been a couple of problems where it downloaded a file incorrectly. I believe it was because their servers were busy doing something over the weekend. So just try to get through this. This one right here, 37 minutes, 36 minutes, that's pretty darn good. So go ahead and let that finish. And then when you're done installing it, we're going to go ahead and finish the installation, maybe even start it up. Okay, so we're all done with our Mac installation. So I'm going to go ahead and just click next. Now it asks me if I want to open up the creator and the designer. I actually turn those off because I like to look to make sure I can get to them in the applications folder. So I'm going to go to applications and I'm going to look for QT. And if you notice, they're not there. So the reason they're not in your applications folder is because now I'm going to eject the installation. So I'm going to bring up my Finder. I'm going to go into, well, it doesn't have the folder sitting there in the Finder. So I'm going to go Home. And it's right here, and there's QT right there. So I'm just going to double click on that, and there's your QT creator and your maintenance tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to my desktop, and I'm going to hold the Command-Alt button on my Mac. And now when I close this, and I open up the QT creator link, now I could also copy that in my applications folder. So you could bring up Finder, click on applications, and you could drag that into there. And it's going to go in there and it's going to verify it. The newest Mac operating systems are very, very security conscious, which is a good thing, but it also creates a lot of hassle. So it's checking everything out. It's going to launch it, hopefully. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Come on, come on. I'm not religious, but I'm praying right now. And there we go. So it came up okay. It looks all right. We have Xcode in, so it should build just fine. What I would do if I were you right now is go ahead and take a look at the demo project. At the end of this, you can go down to the chapter links underneath the description, and you can click on that, or you can just stand by because the Mac installation was the last one, and then the demo code is right after that. So see you at the demo code. Hey everybody, so I went ahead and I installed QT on Windows, I installed it on Linux, I installed it on the Mac, but we're here on Windows. Let's go ahead and show you a demo. It's exactly the same on the other platforms. That's what's beautiful about QT. So there's a bunch of things that happen or that are displayed when you open up QT Creator. And if you don't remember how we did it, or if you were on Windows or Mac, or Linux or Mac, the way we started it on Windows is we just went to search, I just typed QT, and we started the QT Creator community. So, and that's what brought up this window. Now notice all of these things about configure Android. I'm just going to close all these. Take the UI tour. You might want to do that, but I'm going to click close it right now. It asks me if I want to set up this SDK. I'm going to go ahead and say don't show that. And then it says the use of CLang for C++ code model was disabled. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and just close that one. All right. So those shouldn't be displayed again. If they are, we might deal with it later on. But let's go ahead and create our first project. So this is going to be a C++ project. So I'm going to click on Create Project. I'm going to select Application QT, QT Widgets, and I'm going to drop down and go to Desktop Templates and click Choose. And then I'm going to give it a name. Now, I always like to put my QT projects into a folder. So I'm going to click on Browse. I'm going to go to my Documents. I'm going to right-click on there, and I'm going to say New Folder, and I'm just going to call this QT. I'm going to double-click on that. I'm going to say Select Folder, and then I'm going to give it a title. I don't know, Test QT. And I'm going to use this as the default destined project location. And click Next. Now it asked me if I wanted to use CMake. Now this is the make mechanism. How am I going to make the application? And I'm going to drop that down and select QMake because that's QT's make. I'm going to click Next. Now this asks you for the name of the main window and all that. I always like to put a PP at the end of the header file because that tells me that that is a C++ header file and not one which is compatible with C. So I always add a CPP at the end. Everything else you can leave it alone. Next, 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 and then finish. And then what you get is you'll see your source code here. Now don't freak out, source code GUI, oh my god, what am I going to do? Well, expand your forms, click on main window UI, double click on it, and you're going to see your main window. This is like a drag and drop interface for your main window. For our very first application, we're going to keep it very simple. I'm going to drag a push button onto my main window. Okay, as I move it around, it must have something to do with the size of my cursor, where the push button gets really, really big. The other thing I can do is I can just use my keyboard to move it around. Now I'm going to change the push button from push button to just close. So that's what's going to be displayed on the screen. Now if I just say up here build, run, it's going to ask me, do I want to save those files? I'm going to say save all. And then my GUI application should just pop up. And there it is. Now the close button doesn't do anything. I can press it, but nothing is happening. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now the other thing that we can do here, I'm going to expand this. I can make my window a little bit smaller. Let's scroll down to the bottom. There we go. So I can move things around a little bit here. Okay. So now when I run it, I'm going to say build, run, save all, because I changed the size of the window and the position of the close button. All right, there we go. So it doesn't do anything, so I have to close it over on the right. I'm going to right click on the button, close button. I'm going to say go to slot, and I'm going to make sure clicked is selected, and then I'm going to click OK. Now this is the actual code where you tell Qt what to do when the user presses the close button. A slot is an event, and clicking on the close button creates what they call a graphical user interface event, and that event is going to run the on push button clicked function, which you see right here. So for within there, I'm going to type Q application, quit. I'm going to go up to build, run, save all. And now my GUI application should show up, but now watch what happens when I press the close button. The application closes. So we actually made some functionality of our program. Now the window, if I click on the window, You can see all kinds of settings down here, and you should also be able to find the actual name of the window. And there's the window title. So I'm going to type in my first app. I'm going to say build, run, save all. And now instead of main window up here, it says my first app. I'm going to click close, and there's our first demo. Now, you have to run your demo through QT Creator, but there's a way to package it to be able to give it to your friends or to be able to actually install it on another computer without having to install all of QT, because you saw how painful that was. Okay? So there we go. That's a demo of our first QT app. Keep an eye out for more videos on graphical user interface coding. Until then, see you at the next video.